Welcome everyone, and it's always a pleasure to share what I feel very passionate about, which is using mindfulness to help both caregivers and persons with dementia. And this is an approach that's really foundational and that can be introduced in conjunction with other trainings. But it really gets at the foundation of, caring for a person with dementia ought to be. So I want to just go over the agenda. First, I want to talk about dementia care stress, and then introduce mindfulness and the link between mindfulness and stress reduction. Then talk about the link between mindfulness and the ability to be more present as caregivers. Then we're going to get to practice. And then we'll talk about something else that's a part of this approach that's called Experiential Understanding. And then we'll talk about where to get this training. And then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for question and answers. I know we're starting late, and I do have to leave at 12. So we'll see how we'll make it work. So let's see. So I just want to take a few seconds to ask for the ones of you who are providing care right now, and get a sense of how are you doing in terms of stress. And just answer that question for yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being incredibly stressed. How are you doing? How have you been doing? How many people are more than 5? Wow, not much stress in this room. Then you don't need this presentation. Okay. Well, the statistics are a little less optimistic. These are statistics from the Alzheimer's Association, and I always like to share those because it normalizes the experience that most caregivers have. 61% of dementia caregivers suffer from high emotional stress. 43% high physical stress. Are concerned about maintaining their health, 75%. Suffer from depression, 33%, very high number. Feel on duty 24/7 during the last year of care, 59%. And this one, I think, is really telling. Feel relief when the person dies, 72%. And the length of the journey is on average 4 to 8 years post-diagnosis. So we're talking about a marathon here. This is long and intense and relentless. So with that in mind, that really sets the stage for why we want to pay attention to stress as dementia caregivers, and for why we want to learn tools to address that, not just next week, but for years to come. So that means you want to acquire the ability to manage stress long term, not just taking a workshop and then you get to practice a little bit and then that's it. This is a multi-year process. So this is where mindfulness comes in. And I want to ask people in this audience, how many of you know what mindfulness is? Show of hand here. So about a little short of 1/2, okay. How many of you practice mindfulness on a daily basis? Okay. So mindfulness, I'm going to give you the common definition by John Kabat-Zinn. It's being fully aware of a present moment, on purpose, and without judgment. It's very simple. We all have an ability to know what's happening right now. Right now, I am speaking with you, and I'm standing, and there's some noise going on that I can, hear. I also feel quite warm. So this is my experience right now. So mindfulness practice is about practicing this moment to moment and having as little gaps as possible. And let me tell you why that makes sense and why we ought to pay attention to that. It's because mindfulness is a very powerful stress reduction tool. There is more and more neuroscience research that shows that there are significant changes in the brain as we practice mindfulness. It affects the way we regulate our emotions, our ability to stay calm, our ability to be in the moment and not self-ruminate. Many things get impacted by that practice. And 30 years ago, a gentleman called John Kabat-Zinn created this program called MBSR, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. And this program is a program that's being studied. It's being studied more and more to show that people who follow that 8 weeks training exhibit remarkable changes in their ability to handle stress. So they may have the same amount of stress, but the way they respond to it makes it that so that it's not felt as stressful to them, and their health, emotional and physical, is impacted positively. It's now taught in over 250 clinics in the country and hospitals. It's taught at Stanford, it's taught at UCLA, it's taught at UCSF, it's taught at Harvard, UCSD, pretty much every major research institution or medical school or medical organization, HMOs, Kaiser, it's taught in all these places. And it's also taught in schools, in prisons, in businesses. Google teaches it to their employees. One area where it hasn't been taught so much is actually in this field, which is very amazing because this is probably one of the fields that need it the most. And that's why I'm so passionate about this, because I'm convinced if it was more widespread, there would be less suffering. So that's for MBSR, and I'm going to show you a graph that shows the research and what's been happening over the last couple of years. So this program was started 30 years ago, but look at the exponential growth of research. Is because it's working, and people want to establish more and more why and how to use this. And then there's also something else that's very interesting. There's some research that's been done recently at UCSF by a researcher. Her name is Elizabeth Blackburn, and she's done research on telomeres. And so these red caps here, we should be very concerned about those. They are caps at the end of our chromosomes. And the research shows that it's very much in our interest that they stay as long as possible. If they get shorter, that means our chances of living longer are compromised. And she has done, Elizabeth Blackburn and her team have done a lot of research with caregivers. They started with mothers of sick children, chronically ill sick children, and have shown that the telomeres in those moms were significantly shortened. And also that the enzyme, the telomerase, which is the enzyme that enables repairing these telomeres, the levels were also much lower. And then they also did a study that the results have not been published, but they talk about that study with dementia caregivers, and they found the same thing. So caregiving, long-term caregiving of an intense nature, such as dementia care, is actually very hazardous to your health. And that's why you want to pay attention to that. And then now we're doing another study, which is with mindfulness, and to show that mindfulness can actually reverse or mediate some of the effects of that stress from caregiving, and help keep those telomere a good size, so that they're not shortened or they can repair. So that's another reason why mindfulness practice is so important. It's so simple, but yet very few of us practice. So that's why I'm here speaking to you today, is to convince you that it's really important. Then there's another reason why we want to practice mindfulness as dementia caregivers, besides stress reduction. The other reason is that it uniquely equips us to provide the best care possible for the persons in our care. Why? It's because mindfulness is about cultivating this ability to be in the present moment. And we know that a person with dementia lives mostly in that present moment reality. So it's very important that we join them in that reality. If we don't, we run into trouble. And it's also, besides that ability to be in the present and to meet them in their reality, it also enables us to be aware of what's happening in the person's environment, being aware of the sounds, how many sounds are coming to that person, how low, how high, and if we're aware, then we can change the environment if we need to. We can be aware of what are we really seeing that the person is also seeing, and that maybe we don't notice if we're not being mindful. So then again, we can change what's happening in that person's environment. Smelling, tasting, touching, all these are very important parts of the dementia experience. And we also, when we practice mindfulness, drop down below thinking to experiencing. And a person with dementia, that's what happens with them. Their thinking becomes less important because it's altered and it's not working as well, but they're very much into experiencing, sensing. So we want to be at that level also. We want to be sensing more. We want to be in our body. We also want to be in our heart. And that's another benefit from mindfulness practice. There are practices that are part of that training that help you access your heart and the love in your heart. I want to read a quote because I just love this quote from Nancy Pierce. She's a geriatric social worker who wrote the book Inside Alzheimer's. And she says, "I have discovered that it isn't so much about what I did or did not see or do that was key to pass on to professionals and family members. It was more about the way in which I was being with the persons who have dementia. That seemed important to communicate. Each person with dementia has taught me the importance of relaxing into being into the present moment. That moment may be perceived by her to be in a different place or time, but it is her very real and present moment." So, many of the trainings that you will receive in dementia are more tricks in what to do. This is teaching you something a little different. It's that base attitude that we need to take on to be present and also take best care of ourselves. And you can also take those other trainings, but without that foundation, it's not going to stick and it's not really going to help you in depth. This is going at very deep inside, and it implies some transformation, some attitudinal shift, what she's talking about here. So mindfulness, we could talk about it for hours, we could read hundreds of books, but until we actually practice it, it's not going to do us any good. So I would like to invite you to practice with me for a few minutes so you have a little taste. And so I'm going to sit, and you're already sitting, that's a good start. And I would like to invite you to close your eyes and also make sure there's nothing hindering you, nothing on your laps, nothing in the way of how you're sitting. And you want to pay attention to your posture. I like to sit up really straight. but at the same time relaxed. So you want to relax your shoulders and your neck and really assume this really sitting posture. Starting by becoming aware of our feet touching the ground, getting in touch with the sensations, and then moving up our legs, and becoming aware of our thighs and our buttocks that are resting on the chair, continuing with our whole body, sensing into our whole body. And then shifting our attention to the breath, wherever it is most prominent, whether in the belly, or the chest, or the nose. Wherever we feel it the most, we start paying attention to each breath coming and going. The sensations with each inhalation and each exhalation. And we shift from an active way of being to a more receptive way. Simply watching the breath as it arises all by itself without us having to do anything. We may notice sounds, simply noticing and then returning to the breath as many times as necessary. Same thing with thoughts, realizing that the mind thinks and produces thoughts all the time. So here we simply notice each thought. We don't get lost in the thought. We just notice and then return to the breath, to watching each breath coming and going. And as we do that, we may notice some tensions, some places in the body, and we can soften the tension, soften the edges, leaving the tension a way to be and dissolve. We can also pay attention to our attitude in the moment. Do we like what we are experiencing? Or do we not like it? Or are we indifferent? Again, mindfulness is about simply noticing whatever is, whether pleasant or unpleasant, or neutral. keep going back to the breath with the knowledge that each breath is an opportunity for the mind to de-stress and rest from thinking. And last, I'd like to invite you to turn your attention to the heart. Evoking the image of a most beloved person or ideal or being. And feeling your heart being filled with warmth and love and care and tenderness. And if no one comes to mind, simply being aware of that. That too is part of mindfulness practice. And then taking some of that same love and care and warmth in your heart, sending it to yourself, or having the intention of sending it to yourself. And then notice what happens when you do that. Again, emotions may arise or thoughts, and we make room for those also. Because loving oneself is a very hard thing, and it's a practice. And then we turn to thinking about the person next to you in this room. We also send them some of that warmth and love and care. And we extend it to everyone in this room, everyone at this conference. We also think of the ones in our care, and we do the same thing, going back to that feeling of warmth and love that we have for our most beloved. We send some of that same warmth to the person in our care. And again, we pay attention to what arises as we intend to do this. And we make room for everything, all the thoughts, emotions that may arise. And returning back to the breath one last time. And then when you're ready, opening your eyes, taking time to reacclimate to the light and to your experience of sitting in this room with other people. So I'd like to ask for some, how was it like? Were you surprised? Were there challenges? How was it for you? Anybody would like to share?
Sure.
Yes.
I felt a little distracted. I could hear a man's voice over there, so then I was just coming back to the breath, and then I go back to
Yes.
the voice back.
Yes, and that's part of the mindfulness. It's really including everything. So not, and maybe it was annoying, then you would include the annoyance, the reaction to that experience. Yes, you wanted to share also.
Yeah, it was relaxing.
Relaxing?
Yeah, and it was just calming.
Calming.
And I too was, had some distractions, just the thoughts that come in.
So the thoughts were distracting.
Yeah,
yes.
Just trying to let them come in and then let them go.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Yes. And there's a misconception with a lot of people that this practice ought to be blocking the thoughts. And then some people try to practice and they say, I can't practice. And really it's not about that. Because you can't stop the mind from doing whatever it's going to do. The practice is about noticing what's happening and then bringing it back over and over again to the object of attention that we have selected. Anybody else would like to share? Yes.
I just wanted to ask, if you fall asleep, is it as effective for you? Because
falling asleep?
When I was learning this some years ago, I was falling asleep.
Yes, so falling asleep happens a lot, especially when you're a caregiver because you're exhausted. So the first thing you notice is how tired you are, and you fall asleep. So I would say get more sleep, and also depends what time of the day you're doing it. You're more likely to fall asleep at this time, for instance. But if you do it first thing in the morning, less likely. And also I recommend that you do this first thing in the morning because it's like putting something in your bank account, your presence bank account. And you're present for whatever you do for the rest of the day. And also you're less likely to skip your practice. I know for me, if I don't do it first thing, it's a challenge to squeeze it in. I usually end up not doing it and paying the price for it. So, and then also some people say practice with your eyes open, or practice standing up. You can do it standing up. It's hard to fall asleep when you're standing up. And there are other practices that I teach, like walking practice. So there's many ways. Yes.
I have a question. As you go through this process over and over again,
yes.
in time do you lose that feeling of when you're trying to concentrate on your breathing and you get those distractions? You train yourself to get rid of those distractions?
You still hear. You still hear what's happening. It's just easier to bring the mind back, particularly with the thoughts.
Okay.
And I would say I would not worry about that. The main thing is just notice what's happening. Notice. Because then you can bring that ability to when you're with the person you're caring for. The same way we were sitting, I can sit with Beverly. I would not be facing her like that. I would probably be closer, but I can sit with her and bring that same attitude of calm, centered presence. And then start connecting with you. So it's very important to learn to sit. Many times in communities I'll go and I see people, they're all walking around. So actually, I'm consulting for a community right now, and in the assisted living industry, the term that's used in the morning for staff meetings is stand-ups. Let's go to stand-up meeting. So now I'm reframing it as sit-downs. Now those are sit-down meetings, and we do practice this together. But there's a whole bias in our culture. We're always walking around really fast, and we're dealing with people who are mostly sitting down and very slow. So we need to adjust. Part of what we do when we practice this, we meet the experience of a person in our care. Yes?
As a caregiver, I've really adjusted my gauge as far as really slowing down, because
yes.
you cannot make an Alzheimer's person go at,
right.
go at your pace. I mean, you have to go at their
so
pace.
You've adjusted your pace.
So
yeah.
I've adjusted my pace. But what I find very challenging as a caregiver is thinking about all the other things that need
Yes.
to be completed in a day, like
Yes.
you know, changing the beds and grocery shopping
Yes.
and cooking and all of those things. So, you know, how would you?
How do you deal with that?
How, right, because I feel like I've mastered to a good extent, you know, the ability to really slow down in some areas, but when I'm having a meal with a person that can take an hour and a half,
Yes.
and that's an activity
Yes.
for that person. Yeah.
How do you deal with that without
and then
your
not
mind?
have guilt for, you know, leaving the person at a dinner table alone, you know, because to me that feels disrespectful in
Yes.
the way that I've managed my life and my family.
Yes.
So to leave someone sitting at the table alone just doesn't seem like the proper
Right.
thing to do.
Right. Yeah. So you're wondering about how to deal with the long meals, for instance.
Correct.
Yes.
Mhm.
And part of this training we practice actually mindful assistance with meals. And sometimes it's logistics, you know, it's maybe getting somebody else to help you with that, to be present for that person, or and I'm not sure, you know, what the specifics are of your current life. The other question you asked was, you know, I'm preoccupied with planning, I need to plan. So this practice really teaches you to, when you do something, that's what you do. Sylvia Boorstein, in one of her books, she talks about her grandfather, and he says, when I walk, I walk. So, you know, when you're with a person and assisting them with eating, that's what you do. When you plan, when you're planning. So being in the present doesn't mean you don't plan, it's just that that's what you do, you know. So we learn to single task, not so much multitask. Yes.
But that's, I mean, if I were to sit just for an hour and a half or up to 2 hours
Mm-hmm.
for a meal and not, you know, get up and do some other things like put a load of wash in,
Yes.
and then feed the dogs,
Yes.
and then,
Yes.
you know, take the clothes and put them in
Yes.
the dryer, and then
Yeah.
make the bed, and then
Yes.
read, you know.
You know, it's not a perfect world.
Okay.
So you just you're shooting for something,
Uh-huh.
and then you do what you can. You do the best you can.
So,
you know.
so then, right, so
Yes.
then it's okay to just be down to the lowest common denominator in some,
You do whatever you can,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
but at least you've got a benchmark. You know what to shoot for,
right.
you know, and then you don't want to go into guilt, because that would be the next
Right.
step,
Because
right?
that's the self-ruminating.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
right. Yes,
So you seem to be presenting essentially a meditative practice, and is there some level of that meditative practice that you can actually share with the person you're caregiving for?
you know, you can share it just by your own practice, you know, bringing that presence to the person, they will feel it. It's amazing. You know, if you've been sitting and you go to meet a person who has dementia and you sit with them, it's really a remarkable thing. I call it mindfulness by proxy. Because you feel, you can see how there's space that's created in their brains through the creation of space in your own brain. And they have more space for their connections to happen in their brain. People will start speaking who were not speaking before, just because this calm.
But how about taking it to the next level where you're actually instructing them in?
You know, I do that in my private practice. I have some clients who have early stage, and they need to be guided every step of the way, because otherwise they forget. And it works. It's a good thing to do, sure, yes. You know, I'm aware of the time, so I want to make sure I can cover whatever else I need to cover here. I just want to talk about the last practice I did when I was sitting, which was loving kindness practice, because that's a very important part of this training. And loving kindness practice is a compassion practice, and it's actually being studied right now with war veterans and for PTSD. It's that powerful. And that's a practice you can do for yourself when you're in the midst of very intense emotions such as anger, grief, fear, frustration. And it's not this slide, I'm just going back to what we're doing. And it's also very good to prepare oneself before meeting someone that you're going to care for. So you're preparing the heart, your heart, to meet that person. Part of the presence care approach is to combine mindfulness with an experiential understanding of the experience of the person with dementia. It's so that you know what to do in the moment with that particular person. And I just want to go over, this is a quote from Dr. Power. This is a book I really recommend. It's called Dementia Beyond Drugs. And he makes a good, really good explanation of this model. And he says, dementia is a shift in the way a person experiences the world around them. So it's really important that we understand their world. And in the presence care approach, we do a lot of role plays. Right now, UCSF, we did 2 role plays so far. And it's been really important for the people in that training to get to understand what it's like to be in that person's skin. Nancy Pierce also says the path for encouraging the person with dementia to participate in life, human interactions, lies in our opening to enter her world. So we really want to step into the person's shoes. And I want to tell you the story of Jane, because it's such graphic visual illustration of what I'm talking about. So one night I came up to the dining room of the community, and I saw Jane. She was having dinner, and there were other people around her table. It's a rectangular table. She was sitting at one end, and I come like this. And all of a sudden, Jane stands up. Jane is labeled a fall risk, and it's very important she doesn't stand up and start walking around because she's going to fall. So all the caregivers just rush and say, sit down, sit down, sit down. And you know, there's fear, and Jane is not about to sit down. She's standing up and she's about to take steps. So I go next to her and I ask her if she would, connect and do all the things I know how to do, and she still does not sit down. And then she asked me, I said, how can I help you? And she said, I want a Kleenex. Can you get me a Kleenex? So I go get a Kleenex, and as I go and meet Jane, so I hand her the Kleenex, and I just look, and what do I see facing her? I see Joe, who's at the other end of the table, and he's got snot coming down his nose, going down on his knees, and that's what Jane is seeing. So she says, would you mind? I said, okay, so I go to Joe and ask Joe if I may help him, and Joe can't speak, but I then go back to Jane, and she goes, now that's better, and sits down. But that's what happens when you don't see the world from the person's perspective. You literally have to see the world from being in their shoes and see through their eyes, and then you understand. Otherwise, it's totally misunderstood. So these are some of the principles, and I'll go over this very quickly. First, we need to relate to the person's traumas. We need to understand part of that person's experience. Automatically, with a diagnosis of dementia, you're someone suffering from many traumas. Trauma from the diagnosis, trauma from the people's around you's reaction to the diagnosis, trauma from the many losses that start happening in terms of your abilities and functioning. And then if you leave home, trauma of leaving home, trauma of having to adjust to a foreign environment, having to live in a room, sometimes a shared room with some roommate, trauma of being subjected to an environment over which we have no control. So many things. I did an exercise, I came up with over 100 losses, significant losses that someone with dementia experiences. Each one of those losses would push us over the edge here. So it's just to really appreciate that clinically that's what's present. So we need to know that. And we also need to not be shy to talk about it with a person. We need to honor their preferences. We need to know what was this person doing before they had the diagnosis, what is their passion, their hobbies, what are they doing right now, what do they like right now. And we need to constantly update those preferences because they're going to shift. And we need to find ways to positively engage the person. So part of mindfulness and compassion is to do that. It's an active stance and going, because that person no longer has executive functioning. They rely on us to initiate things, including pleasant things. We need to positioning awareness. I mean by that we all tend to view someone with a disability as less able than they are. And because of the physical presentation, and also the way the person starts relating to us, it's very easy for us to jump from this person has a disability to this person cannot do anything. And it's pervasive. You see that happening in communities everywhere. I notice myself doing it, pretty much daily, and I constantly have to readjust. And whenever I'm meeting someone, I always check, what am I feeling, what am I thinking, what's my attitude towards that person? Do I still see a whole person there? And then I readjust, and I behave as if there is a whole person there, which varies. The fourth point is the 5 universal emotional needs. This is a short list that can be very handy, and I really urge you, if you go on my website, there's articles. Dr. Power also talks about that in his book. But basically, the first one is the ability to choose, maximizing the person's decisions to choose. Because the person with dementia has lots of control over their lives. So we want to maximize opportunities for this control to still take place. And that's at every step of the way. It starts the moment the person gets up. Very important, the waking up process, because you're setting the tone for the whole day. So I teach people, we do experiential around that. How do you wake up someone? First you knock on the door, you don't turn on the light right away, you start making a connection with the person, introduce yourself, maybe you ask permission to sit by the bed, and you start quietly, softly engaging that person. That's how you start the day. But very often it doesn't happen that way, and it's brutal. The wake up is brutal, and then it's just downhill from there. The second need is the need to be useful and contribute. Because we have dementia does not mean that we don't want to still contribute. We need to feel useful, and in many ways. So the more the disease progresses, the more creative we have to be in facilitating that need. Then there's the need for the self-esteem to be boosted. The need to love and be loved. So being reassured of that we're being loved often, because we forget. And then the need to care and be cared for. So not just being cared for, but also having the opportunity to still care for others. In communities, oftentimes you'll see residents caring for each other. There's this continuous need to care, or wanting to care for staff. So when you cut that off, it's felt as an injury by the person. So we want to really pay attention to that. That is actually linked to the 6th point, which is care partnering. It's really viewing the other person as a partner in dealing with their illness. So we're here to support them, and they're here to teach us what they need. And we do this together. It's not, I'm giving care to you, you're the subject of my care, and I have this power position over you. It's more equal. And the 5th thing is behavior as expressions of unmet needs, is that every behavior, no matter how nonsensical it may appear, actually there's a good reason for that behavior. It's an attempt to communicate something that's not right now in the moment. So we need to recognize agitation, pacing, wandering, even sometimes what's labeled as hallucination or delusions, as things that are grounded in the person's experience, their reality. And it's our job to understand. We're the ones that have a problem because we don't understand. Sorry, I just want to make sure I cover. Just check the time. Okay. So actually, if you want to ask your question, and I'll talk about it.
It's actually not a question. I heard that Dr. Power speak.
Yes.
In May.
Yeah, he was here actually.
Yeah,
Yes.
and he spoke to those unmet needs of a patient who he got anxiety, the agitation
Yes,
that
yes,
they described
yes.
as sundowners,
Yes.
and they wanted to use
Yes.
a drug on him.
Yeah, yes.
And it turned out that he wanted to talk to his wife,
Yes.
and they
Yes.
got him a telephone.
Yes.
And
Yes.
he calmed down.
Yes.
But he got the social worker involved. The
Yes.
doctor did.
Social workers are good. How many social workers in this room? Just curious. Hey, good. So I want to tell you another story. It's a story of Bob. So one morning I showed up in the community and it was time for exercise. And everybody had pretty much gathered for exercise. The music had started, and there was one resident client, Bob, who was still sitting in his chair and not about ready to join the exercise. So again, the care partners, I call caregivers care partners, by the way. It's a nice reframe. The care partners went one by one trying to convince Bob to please stand up, and Bob is just staring at them. Bob can no longer speak, but he's smiling once in a while. So finally I come and I figure, well, rather than standing, I'll sit next to him, because that's what I do. And I start, trying to engage him, and he looks at me and is smiling, and so okay. So after a while, I give up my agenda. It's like, forget this, And as I do that, and I really become present for Bob, I notice that Bob's eyes are going like this. Just a few times he goes like this. So then it dawns on me that maybe Bob is tired. So I asked Bob, I said, are you tired? So when I say that, he reaches out and grabs my hand and squeezes it really hard. So Bob was tired. And then when we offered to him to go and rest, he stood up right away. So this is an illustration of, again, what happens when we have our own ideas, we are into our own world of what needs to happen, and we don't meet the person's reality in this moment. And we don't take the time, and we still have our agenda going. So we totally misread what's that person need. So we need to take the time and just be present and observe. So this was really a mindfulness practice. It was about seeing what was going on with Bob. So then I want to talk about this training, this presence care, mindfulness-based care training. It's going on at UCSF. We have our first course started 2 weeks ago. It's an 8-week training. It will be happening every quarter. And it's at the UCSF Osho Center for Integrative Medicine. And it's very exciting because it's the first time such a course is giving like this in a major research institution. And we have decided to open it to everyone that's in dementia care, so not just family caregivers, but we have home care agencies, we have assisted living professionals, and a variety of diagnoses represented, from frontotemporal to Alzheimer's, Lewy body. So it's a very wonderful group. Another way to bring this approach is to go into the organizations themselves. So right now I'm training the staff at 2 assisted living communities in Oakland and Emeryville, Lakeside Park and Bayside Park. And it's been also very exciting because it's bringing the whole care community together. Not just the care partners, but we also have the staff, the managers, we have the families involved, and we have some residents involved. And it's really beautiful to see everyone role-playing together, practicing mindfulness together, and then making it happen on a daily basis. And we're talking about changing a culture here. This is very difficult. So we're going very slowly. You know, we're practicing only a few things every month. And then next month we're going to practice something else. And I'm going to be doing the same thing at Catholic Charities CYO San Carlos Adult Day Program. This time in a day program. And again, training the staff and opening it to the families and well-interested clients. And then it can happen also one-on-one. I do some coaching of caregivers and guide them through that process. So it's really trying to disseminate this approach so that more and more people can have it and then pass it on to other people. In terms of training, you really need to have a good foundation of mindfulness practice. So unless you have this mindfulness practice really firmly anchored, you won't be able to teach that to other people. So the first thing is you need to really practice this mindfulness practice. And let's see.
What day is that Tuesday? Is it Tuesday for the Catholic Charity in San Carlos?
There's several dates. Oh, and also the staff training I'm doing. You know, I forgot. It's one is on Tuesday, one is on Monday. But you know, it's yeah.
How do we find out when you're doing it?
You would call them. Call Catholic Charity. Yeah. See, you know, I'm not sure it's open to the public at this point, but call. See. So this whole training is kind of like riding a bicycle. Once you learn it, you will not forget it. It's that basic, and it really gets into your whole being, your body and your mind, and you will have the automatic reflex almost. You know, you may forget once in a while, but it will transform how you are as a caregiver. And it will also help protect you from the stress that you're likely to experience. And in the end, this is the benefits that we're hoping for. Less stress for you and also for the person in your care, because the more apt you are at providing care, the less stress that person is going to be, and also the greater well-being for everyone. So it's a win-win situation. The only challenge is to do it. So I would like to end by asking you to reflect on what is the one thing you took away today that you might practice when you leave this conference. Just take a few moments. You may close your eyes. You can practice the stopping and taking a breath, observing what's going on inside of you. And then in that space, reflect. What's the one thing that stands out that you heard today or experienced today in this last hour that you can bring into your life? And then I'd like to invite, if anybody wants to share, what is it that you're taking away? Would you like to share with the group? Yes?
Letting go our own mind, think from the perspective of the person we take care of.
Yes. So abandoning our agenda and meeting that person. Letting go, yes. Anybody else? Yes.
When you spoke about Jade, literally, putting yourself beside Jane so you saw what she saw.
Yes, you'll remember that story.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
Well, I do a mindfulness meditation every morning. I'm a caregiver, but now I know I'm a care partner.
Yes. So care partner.
But I've never done the heart part.
Ah, okay.
Where you thought of someone you love,
Yes.
and you gave yourself love, and then your neighbor, and then your
Yes.
the person you're caring.
Yes. Yes. Oh, good. Yeah, that loving kindness practice.
So that's called loving kindness.
Yeah, loving kindness practice. There's many practices that we experience in this training, you know. Another one I haven't talked about is mindful walking, which is also very important. Anybody else? Yes?
I just love this presentation and the message you're bringing. I do what you've been talking about. I am a care manager.
Oh.
And one thing I just want to say, you're actually also giving permission for everybody. And being with also includes being, letting your hair down, singing a song, dancing in the
Yes.
moment. And when you're out there, do it.
Whatever.
Really be there.
Do whatever.
Be there for
Yes.
them, with them in the moment.
Yes, yes. No matter how ridiculous it may
Yep.
feel. Yes, yes. Okay, anybody else before one more? Yes?
Well, what I took away was just being reminded of the importance of just being in the moment without
Yes.
your agenda, without judgment, without thinking too much, just
Yes.
being there.
Experiencing.
And then I just wanted to say that I took care of my husband for 12 years. He had early onset dementia. He was diagnosed in his 50s and I was in my 50s. And I realized that without a vocabulary for this, I was nodding my head throughout most of your presentation. I didn't have this vocabulary. I didn't have this intellectual words for this.
Yes.
But it was the most single powerful thing that got me through this. With
Can
him.
everybody hear?
What was it got you through it?
Was being
You know what,
in
I'll
the
give you
moment
it.
with him and
Tell your being what?
Give it
well, I
context.
cared for my husband for 12 years. He had early onset dementia. We were both in our 50s. And without a vocabulary, I didn't have this vocabulary. I didn't have these words for this. But this was so profound. It was the main thing that got me through this. It provided us joy. It provided us the possibility of deep connection and joy and happiness. And I didn't get that for a long time, and I had to struggle and fight and cry and yell and scream before I got to it. But as I got it, and I couldn't do it all the time, but it enabled us from diagnosis to death to have joyful, happy, meaningful connections. And I had to do the inner transformation inside to stop wanting him to be the way he was, not being freaked out about the future, and just be with him in the moment. And there were so many happy moments possible when I was able to do that. So it's just really hard to learn.
Thank you for your testimonial. Just to that point, there's another book that's great. It's by Olivia Ames Robertson. It's called 10,000 Joys and 10,000 Sorrows.
Yes.
And she talks about horizontal time and vertical time. Most of us spend our time in horizontal time, past, present, and future. And it's necessary. We need to know. I need to know that after this I'm going to another meeting. But many times in dementia care, it's not what we need. We need to be in vertical time, which is right now. We need to be in this present moment and view the experience as a succession of vertical times, vertical moments.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something about vertical. For me, vertical was, okay, here's this old man drooling and not looking very cute, but I knew that whole man. I knew him from young man to this person. So
Yes.
the vertical for me was also bringing my whole set of feelings and love for him throughout many, many years to this present moment.
Yes.
That's the way I thought of
Yes.
vertical.
Yes. Anyway, well, I want to thank you, everyone, for sharing this with me, and I really always appreciate these wonderful stories you can say.
I'm gonna put it in front for John Campbell.